So let's talk a little bit about the competition. Your book considers the competition to be part of the environmental scanning. But think about it. For most companies, the competition is absolutely the biggest concern that those firms have. Think about someone like Toyota. What do you think Toyota worries about? Well, obviously, their biggest concern are the other automobile companies who are trying to take some of their market share away, trying to reduce the sales of their Accords and their Civics and their line of SUVs. So when we talk about defining the competition, it's way more important than the other environmental aspects. The competition is anyone that's contending for the same customer. And one of the reasons that we want to talk about the competition privately and separately is because the competition is the most dangerous environment. Why? Well, it's because the competition is intelligent. That is, the competition gathers data, looks at data, turns that data into information, takes that information and makes decisions with it. Understand that the competition is reactive. That is, they react to whatever the other organizations and firms in the industry do. And then finally, it's purposeful and intentful. That is, it has a specific intention, and that intention, of course, might be to take away your market share or steal your customers. When we define the competition, there's a couple of little things that I always like to point out. First off, most marketers spend more time worrying about the competition than anything else. And I would argue that you shouldn't worry about the competition, but there is no better way to spend your time than learning about the competition. Rather than worrying about them, you ought to learn as much as you can about them, much the way that poker players try to learn about the competition that they have at the table when they're playing poker. And of course, one of my favorite lines is that the enemy undetected is the most dangerous, because they're the ones that can sneak up and attack you when you're not looking. Question number one, well, who is the competition? Well, competition are typically the firms that have a similar mission statement, firms that are offering the same products with similar features. Think about someone like the Honda Motor Company. Who do they directly compete with? Well, Toyota has a product that matches virtually every one of their products. So does Nissan. They probably also compete with Chevrolet and Ford and Chrysler, but not to the same degree that they compete with the other Japanese-based automobile companies. Firms that have the same or similar distinct competencies are in direct competition with each other. Firms that are satisfying the same wants and needs and providing the same benefits are the most direct competitors. 2 points to make sure that you understand. One is defining the competition too narrowly creates blind spots. Many firms consider their competition to simply be one or two companies. You need to make sure you have a broad enough view of the competition so that you don't have strategic blind spots. And then secondly, defining the competition too widely results in a lack of strategy. If you think that you're in competition with everybody for every dollar, well, then the problem is there's no real strategic way to use that information and come up with a strategy. Direct competition are those organizations that satisfy the same wants and needs, direct choice alternatives, the next best alternatives. An example for direct competition for someone like Toyota Camry would be the Honda Accord. Generic or indirect competition are those satisfying the basic same wants and needs after the same dollars or loose substitutes. So, for instance, you might make the argument that the Chevrolet Colorado pickup truck competes with the Honda Accord. Well, they're not directly competing with them, but they are going after automotive dollars, so they would be called indirect or generic competition. Number of approaches to determining the competition. Well, let someone else do it, like the NAICS codes or the SIC codes. You can use managerial judgment. One of the things with managerial judgment is if we ask the companies, who do you directly compete with, most of them, by the way, will overestimate who their competition is. That is, they believe that they're competing with firms that are probably higher quality than their organization is and who probably offer better products. You can use purchase data like a brand switching matrix, and I'm going to show you that in just a minute. You can use cross elasticities. You remember when you took your basic economics class and you talked about cross elasticities of demand? Well, that's one way to determine whether or not someone is in competition with you. Overall similarity of products, products that have the same marketing mix, that look alike, sound alike, are priced alike, are distributed alike, are most likely in direct competition. And then you can take a customer-oriented approach and you can ask your customers, who else are you considering? When you thought about buying our product, whose other product did you also consider? That's another way to try to determine who your competition is. Here's an example of a brand switching matrix, okay? And so if you look at this matrix, here's how you would read it. In January, the people in the top blue left-hand corner, in January, 0.6 of those people bought Crest, 0.2 bought AIM, and 0.2 bought Colgate. If you turn around then and look at February, the Crest buyers in February would be looking across. And so when we try to identify who the direct competitors are, the direct competitors are those companies that switched brands. The diagonal in this table are people who use the same product 2 months in a row. So for instance, 0.6% or 0.6% of the customers bought Crest both times, 0.4 bought AIM both times, 0.5 bought Colgate both times. So all the numbers on the diagonal are repeat purchasers, and then the ones that are off the diagonal bought different products in the two different times. So for instance, if we take a look at the first column with Crest, in January, 0.6 people, 0.6 of the population bought Crest in January, but of those people who bought Crest in January, 20% of them then bought AIM in February, and 20% bought Colgate in February. The way to determine who you're in direct competition with is to see what other products your customers are buying. So the off diagonal indicates whose brands your customers are switching to. And you can see in this situation that there are two basic sets of competitors. Crest, AIM, and Colgate are competing against each other, and Pearl Drops and Ultra Bright are competing against each other. Key questions. Against whom do you usually compete? That is, if customers don't buy from us, who will they buy from? Think about UNLV as an organization. If you were not going to go to UNLV, where else might you go to school? Well, obviously then one of our direct competitors would be that little school from the north called UNR. Who else, who might be our most intense rivals? That is, who do we have to compete most directly with, and who are our less intense but still serious rivals that we must consider in our marketing strategy? And then who might be the maker of substitutes? So, at the end of the day, the question is, who are our competitors?